This weekend, the Hollywood blockbuster The Promise is released in cinemas across the country. It tells the harrowing story of the Armenian Genocide that was committed by the Ottoman Turks during the First World War. The film conveys the true historical events of the deliberate ethnic cleansing of 1.5 million Armenians and other Christian minorities by the Ottoman government. Still to this day, successive Turkish governments have refused to acknowledge their role and responsibility in committing the Armenian Genocide over 100 years ago. The story of the Armenian Genocide needed to be told, and now it is on the big screen with a star-studded cast to appeal to a global audience who know next to nothing of the suffering and misery of the Armenian people at the hands of the Ottoman Turks. The Promise is set in the dying days of the Ottoman Empire after the Turks aligned themselves with Imperial Germany and the Axis powers against Britain, France and Russia during the First World War. The young Turks who were in the government at the time saw the war as an opportunity to purge the Armenian Christians and other ethnic minorities from the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Turks firstly started to round up the Armenian intellectuals and professionals to break the leadership of their community and make it easier for the Turkish army to capture and murder the rest of the population. The Turks committed hideous acts of brutality against the Armenian people by sending them to labor camps and forced marches into the Syrian desert to die. Armenian towns and villages were destroyed and the people taken away to be massacred.
It's very dangerous for Armenians right now. I want to get you out of here.
If it's not safe for me, then it's not safe for any of my people.
What is the Associated Press doing here?
Reporting on the war.
There is no war here. No one here is safe. I have to get us out of here before there's no time left.
I was told that you organized an escape route. How can I help? Do you love him?
We got him! Run!
You trust no one.
Chris?
We will build a future together.
Tell me what it's for.
The director of The Promise, Terry George, is famous for his previous films In the Name of the Father and the Oscar-nominated Hotel Rwanda. His latest film creates a powerful fictional love story around the real historical events of the Armenian Genocide, based upon Franz Werfel's novel 40 Days of Musadar. The film stars Oscar Isaac, who plays the character of Mikhail Bogashan, a young Armenian student who finds himself at medical school in Constantinople before the start of the war. He is betrothed to an Armenian girl from his local town, and he makes a promise to return to her once he is qualified as a doctor. Whilst at university, he falls in love with a beautiful Armenian dance teacher called Anna, played by Charlotte Lee Bon, who was in a relationship with an American reporter called Christopher Myers, who is played by the famous actor Christian Bale. In the film, their life in the Ottoman capital was going well until the outbreak of the First World War, and Mikhail starts to feel the discrimination against him because of his Armenian background, as a wave of Turkish nationalism sweeps through the empire. Turkish mobs attack the Armenian communities in Constantinople and round up the intellectuals, including Mikhail's uncle. The film portrays how quickly the political climate changes from peaceful coexistence to one of uncertainty and fear, as they now find themselves as the enemy of the empire. In the film, Anna's boyfriend, Christopher Myers, the American journalist, who works for the Associated Press, hears about the brutal attacks against the Armenian communities and goes out to discover the truth for himself. He witnesses the roundup of entire Armenian towns and villages and sees a young mother with a child being shot by an Ottoman officer. He then goes on a mission to write and photograph the genocide, to document his findings and report back to the American public. The director emotionally captivates you through the passionate relationship between Mikhail and Anna as they fall in love and try to survive. But they become separated when Mikhail is arrested and sent to a labor camp. He escapes, returns to his village and marries the woman he was betrothed to after pressure from his family. Mikhail warns his family about the dangers that they face at the hands of the Ottomans as he leaves his old life in Constantinople behind and settles down with his new wife hidden in the mountains. It's not long before the Ottoman army enters Mikhail's hometown, seeking to round up the Armenian inhabitants. You sense the fear and the desperate plight that the Armenians faced as they tried to escape the approaching Ottoman army. The film also conveys the compassion shown by non-fictional characters such as Christian missionaries who saved hundreds of orphan children and a courageous local Turkish official who assisted them. In the story, Mikhail discovers from his mother that Anna and Christopher are at the local missionary school helping the Armenian children escape from Turkey. He leaves his pregnant wife to be reunited with them to help them. Whilst he's away helping the children escape, his wife and parents are captured. The horrific realities of the genocide are brought home in the film when Mikhail discovers that his parents and his pregnant wife have all been massacred in the forest by the Turks. Through Mikhail's pain and anguish, you sense what it would have been like for these poor Armenians, targeted only because they were Christians. After this disturbing scene, Mikhail, Anna and Christopher flee to the mountains, with the orphan children being pursued by the Ottoman army. A moving scene depicts children and adult survivors sitting on top of the mountain with a priest who prays to the Lord for their protection and redemption. You must watch the film to discover whether the Lord intervenes to save the children and the rest of the Armenians who were stranded on the mountain. Today, the genocide still haunts the Armenian people. 100 years on from the tragedy, they have fought to get their story told, so this film is very important to the community. What Terry George has achieved in making the film is something that previous Hollywood directors in the 20th centuries were not able to do. The Turkish government put pressure on the US State Department to get Hollywood to cancel previous productions. What was the struggle in making this particular film and this particular narrative about the Armenian people?
Well, over the course of 100 years since the genocide itself, there has been a deep desire by the Armenian population to have their story told in cinema particularly. And in the 1930s, a book was written, a very successful book called 40 Days of Mosaddegh, which dealt with, during the genocide, a siege where 7,000 Armenians fled up a mountain in what's now southern Turkey. And the Turkish army laid siege to them, and eventually they were rescued by the French Navy. And that forms a part of the film we shot. The film itself was due to be made by MGM. I think at one point Clark Gable was the star in it, and the Turkish government of the time intervened and interfered with or warned the State Department and then the studios that they would impact the American relationship with Turkey, and the film was squashed. The same book, the rights were acquired in the 70s by Sylvester Stallone, and exactly the same thing happened. The Turkish government intervened and the film again fell apart. We were lucky enough to be financed by an Armenian American businessman, very successful, probably one of the most successful Armenian businessman, called Kirk Kerkorian, who's quite a legendary figure. both in cinema and in business in the United States. His deep desire was throughout his life to have this story told in film and on the scale of such epics as Dr. Zhivago, Lawrence of Arabia, Ryan's Daughter, the English Patient. He wanted a serious epic film that dealt with this subject.
Now, with the film due to hit the cinemas across the UK this weekend, the Turkish government has already started a sophisticated propaganda campaign being coordinated against the film. Successive Turkish governments for over a century have carried out a successful campaign of denial backed up by a wall of silence and intimidation to prevent any discussion on the genocide. To even mention the Armenian genocide in Turkey is a criminal offence. The Turkish government, in response to the film The Promise, has produced their own $30 million English film called The Ottoman Lieutenant, which is also a love story set in the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. This propaganda film makes the claim that there were no deliberate acts of genocide carried out against the Armenian people by the Ottoman Turks, and that both sides were casualties of war. The Turkish government is a key NATO ally of the West, but President Erdogan needs to recognize and acknowledge the role played by the Ottoman Turks in the biggest ethnic cleansing of Christians in world history. The Turkish government is a key NATO ally of the West, but President Erdogan needs to recognize and acknowledge the role played by the Ottoman Turks in the biggest ethnic cleansing of Christians in world history. Turkey needs to come to terms with its past, just like Germany did with their Nazi past. To date, Britain, the United States, and even Israel have caved in to Turkish threats and intimidation by refusing to recognize the Armenian genocide. Now is the time, over 100 years on from the genocide, that they should formally recognize what took place by the Ottoman Turks and acknowledge the hurt and pain that they have caused the Armenian people. Sadly today, there is very little known about the Armenian genocide. Unlike the Holocaust, that is marked by International Holocaust Memorial Day and powerful films like Schindler's List, The Pianist, Defiance, and The Hiding Place, to name but a few. Had it not been for the Armenian genocide, then the Holocaust may not have happened, as many of the Turkish generals responsible for the genocide went on to advise Hitler in how to carry out the final solution. The mass transfer of people into crowded trains, forced labour camps, and the death marches were all ideas taken by the Nazis from the Ottoman Turks. After all, Hitler famously quoted about the Armenian genocide in his speech to his SS commanders a week before the invasion of Poland on August the 22nd, 1939, when he said, "Who remembers the Armenians?" in his reference to the fact that the perpetrators who carried out the hideous crimes of mass murder never faced justice. I believe that it's vital that we should all make the effort to go to our local cinemas and watch this powerful and emotional film, The Promise, in support of the Armenian people in their plight for justice. After all, today Christians are facing another genocide by being brutally murdered in Syria and Iraq by ISIS. We also need to send a message to Hollywood to say there is a public demand for more films like The Promise that tell a powerful historical narrative, unlike some of the popular trashy films out there that no one will remember. But having watched The Promise, you will remember it, and you will know the truth about the Armenian genocide.